everybody. Nice to see you again. If we've never met before, my name is Sharon Chaden Glass, and I'm so happy that you're here with us today for another idea networking session. We are bringing you two new guest speakers today. We have Chris Skees and we have Dejaka Bachman. And with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Chris and let him share his journey into the world of L&D.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me, Sharon. It's good to be here. Can I go ahead and share my screen? I have a little presentation I could share for a minute.
Yeah, let me make sure I got you. Oh, excellent. You did it.
Got
All
it. Okay, cool. So yeah, my name is Chris. I have been in L&D for about 15 years. I got into this space kind of by accident. I was a content person. I was studied writing and English, and I loved editing, writing, things like that. And so started out in marketing, doing copywriting and working on web content. And then I had a friend who was working at a learning startup that was focused on e-learning and custom online modules. So I joined the team at that startup in 2007, and as they say, the rest is history. I stayed with that startup for a few years, and then it was acquired by GP Strategies. You see their logo here on the screen. That's a big global training company. So essentially, they're a vendor that does training projects for clients. So these are people who work at big companies and want to outsource their training to a specialist vendor. So that was really great experience. I really got to know L&D really well. Stayed at that company at GP for about 10 years, and really loved it. So this was kind of the structure of our teams and how that worked. So I was a content developer, project leader, and then eventually became a talent development lead, which just essentially means I was a people manager. I was leading teams of content developers. And what's really cool about this org is this kind of unique structure we had for our project teams. So I know a lot of teachers coming into this industry, they're very focused on ID, instructional design, and I think that's great. There's lots of opportunity there. But you see a lot of other roles on these cross-functional teams. So, we're working with client subject matter experts. IDs do a lot of that, but then we also have the content developer role that's really more focused on writing and editing, grammar, storyboarding, that kind of thing. And then we also had project managers, right? So they focus on details around deliverables, timing, schedules, that kind of thing, keeping everyone on track. So whenever I talk to teachers who are interested in L&D, I'm always kind of wanting to ask a few follow-up questions and just see, is instructional design really the best fit for your skills and your passion and what you enjoy? Or some of these other roles, potentially things that you could be interested in. So happy to talk a little bit more about that. I will share after about 10 years at GP, I moved over to Cisco about 2 years ago. And I'm actually in a booth here at Cisco Live. So there's a lot going on around me here in Las Vegas. But it's really an exciting place to work. I joined Cisco Meraki as a learning content manager about 2 years ago. So there's really three main buckets of what I do day to day. The first is I'm a governance program owner. So essentially here on this first screenshot, you'll see this is just a snapshot of our internal SharePoint site. So I put together all the resources, templates, documentation, tools that our teams need to create learning cohesively across projects so everything looks similar and has a similar look and feel. I'm also a content stakeholder. So through analysis, design, development, and launch, I am looking at work that the teams are doing and just providing the feedback they need, answering their questions, and making sure they're on the right track. So work really closely with our project teams, and I like partnering with instructional designers and content developers and media developers who are doing videos and specialty interactives. I just love working with them kind of hand in hand and seeing them kind of light up and get really excited about new options. And then the third bucket of what I'm doing currently, I'm actually the learning metrics lead for our team. So I track a couple different metrics, both on the learner side. So I'm tracking like our completions and our assessments and kind of content engagement, how courses are performing. And then I'm also tracking how well our teams are doing internally. So how much are we getting done in our sprints? How much work are we getting accomplished? Are we doing more or less work than we did last time? I'm just keeping an eye on those things and trying to keep us moving in the right direction and making sure we're getting better and better as we go. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of where I'm at. And just I'll give you kind of a brief overview. There's a lot of different tools in the industry. This is the learning stack we're using right now. So for project management, we're using Rike, we're using Miro boards. That's the collaborative whiteboard I'm in right now for analysis and design. And then we're lucky enough to work in Google Docs for content. We use Storyline for interactives, Camtasia for videos, and we actually have been using the Xyleme LCMS to do our content development and management. So that's been a really awesome tool. And then we publish that out to an LMS called Absorb, and that's how our learners and customers actually come in, sign up, and engage with our courses and our content as kind of like the implementation phase of Addy there towards the end of the project. So it's kind of an introduction. That's where I came from. That's where I'm at now. These are the kind of things I'm working on these days. So yeah, I'll pause there, and then we can follow up later with any questions you might have.
Perfect. Chris, when you were talking about when you kind of laid out those roles, I'm really glad that you did that because the job that I'm in, I work with a team and it's very similar to that structure that you're talking about. But I would say that in higher education, we have that client SME and the content developer merged into one role.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of problematic sometimes because what ends up happening in course development is we're so dependent on the instructor having enough time to develop that content. And as we all know, teachers have way too much to do. So it kind of gets to like, it keeps getting shoved down the line and okay, well, we'll do it in the summer. And now it's summer and oh, I'm so stressed out. I just need a time to relax. And then it's like, well, we're at June now. And if we don't get going on this is not going to happen for August. So it kind of helps when you're able to separate that stuff out, but that's not always possible. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think where you can like leverage people's expertise, and subject matter experts are not always expert writers, and writers do not always know the technical subject. So if you can separate them, that's great. But sometimes you have to work with what you've got, right?
Absolutely. Okay, Dejaka, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
So hi, I'm Dejaka Bachman, and my current role is a learning content design specialist. I work for a global manufacturing company. I've been in my role for about 3 months now. I started in February, and my team is a lot different, it sounds like, from Chris's team. I have a very small team. I am the only person who does what I do. So I see the process through from analysis all the way to implementation and evaluation at the end. Um, I wear a lot of hats. Some things I do on a daily basis are consulting with SMEs, creating things and authoring tools such as Storyline and Camtasia. I work on storyboarding and outlining. I implement materials and content in the LMS and on our internet site as well. And I also do a lot of project management within that. We don't have a project manager for our team. So I'm kind of a one-person show right now, and we're working on growing, but I love it. Because we are small, we have a lot of freedoms. Another thing I'm doing as part of my role is creating the content creation process standards for our team. So we don't have a nice outline process currently, and we're working to revamp that. So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. Prior to this, I was a teacher. I taught high school Spanish for 16 years, and I taught a lot of different ways. My most recent role was teaching at a virtual school, and that's kind of what drove me into the interest of instructional design. I worked on creating curriculum for our online school and putting that out and kind of training teachers on how to teach virtually. So yeah, I think that's about it.
There I am, unmuted. I like how you talked about just that there are people that do what we do that are end-to-end, concept, designer, creator, producer. It is definitely. What would you say? Do you think that was easy to transition into that role because teachers tend to work in the same vein where we're kind of doing everything that we need to do all by ourselves?
For me, it hasn't seemed like a lot of work, honestly, because I was so used to having to do everything. So I think you're right on that.
Mm-hmm.
However, I have been told, like, you don't have to do it all. Step back, like, stay in your lane kind of thing with certain things. So I'm used to having to do everything and send out all the communications, but we have other people who can do different things. So yes, I'm having a hard time scaling back and adjusting to a slower pace as well.
If you're teaching, you're probably like, why would you have trouble adjusting to a slower pace? That sounds amazing. I would love
No,
that.
it's been really challenging for me,
Yeah.
honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, because when I first started the role right before I'm in right now, I was very puzzled. I was like, I only have like 3 things to do today. Is that okay? And it was, yeah, because that was what was on the docket for the day. Everything else, I was waiting for things to come in, or other things hadn't been decided yet. So you just kind of have to be available to do things as they come in. It was just really strange to get used to that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Awesome. We got through 2 of you pretty fast. So,
Yeah, we can. You know, the only thing I would add, I forgot to mention,
sure.
is that I do have an instructional designer who just joined our team last year, who was a teacher for years. So it's been really great to have her on the team. I was involved in that hiring process, and I'm kind of regularly on hiring panels. So sit in, see a lot of resumes and that kind of thing. So I'm happy to talk about any questions there. Just kind of like the experience our ID has had in positioning and transitioning from teaching, and then kind of what our hiring process is like as well. I could be happy to talk more about that.
Yeah. Before we go to breakout rooms, I'll mention, for the people who are not familiar with my background, I work in higher education. I do instructional design for a community college. So I'm the person who works with faculty to package together content, the assignments, the discussions, all the stuff that goes into an online course. And we do course building. We do also course revision is a big chunk of what we do, is continuing to make our courses updated every 5 years. So I can speak about that if you're interested in that. So I'm going to pause here and get those breakout rooms opened. Okay, and we are back from breakout rooms. Before we get into our whole group Q&A, I want to make sure that you all know the next time that we're meeting. Our next session will not be in July. It will be in August, because July, it was like, I think it's the 4th of July is the first Tuesday of the month. So, and then the next week I'm on vacation. So we're just going to skip July, take July off, and come back August 1st, Tuesday, August 1st, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern.
In our breakout room, Chris, you mentioned the advice to put in a cover letter, like what it is about a company that you're, really excited about, or some connection you have. And that just reminded me of advice I've gotten to sort of focus on an industry. But I think what's exciting to me is companies that really connect learning to their values, and that's sort of not an industry to focus on. And I wonder if you have any advice, or if anyone has advice about really like targeting, maybe that's the wrong move totally, to be targeting that kind of company because it's too broad, and maybe like finding an industry is a smarter move. But just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, when I was looking, I was really focused on determining the values that I was looking for in a company. And so I was able to find like those values of like transparency and remote work and really like work-life balance. Those were kind of my non-negotiables. So I was really interested in companies that would support those values. And so I found a number of them across industries. Cisco was one of them. A couple others companies that really jumped out to me were HubSpot. HubSpot has a great kind of culture. They have a great learning platform in their HubSpot Academy. Another one that jumped out to me is Salesforce, another big company, but they're doing learning really well with their Trailhead experience for their end users. So these were companies where I was excited by what they were doing in learning, and I was excited by kind of their values. But Salesforce and HubSpot, they're kind of business to business, so they're different sectors. So I think it can be smart to focus in on an industry, especially if it's aligned with your kind of L&D niche, which I think is important to know kind of what's unique about you and what you offer. So I can understand how focusing on some industries might be good. I was very interested in tech just based on my experience. So I was looking for more technical companies. So yeah, I would just kind of stay balanced. I mean, it's tough when the job market is so competitive. You might have to go into some industries had not expected. But I'm interested what anyone else thinks about that. If you've been targeting certain companies or certain industries, and how that approach has been working.
I can say from my experience that I was really open to anything. I interviewed with a publisher, was willing to do that job, didn't get that job, which is fine. And the next job that I seriously interviewed was for the position that I got, which was at a community college. And that it felt right because I'd been in higher education for a long time, knew what it was like to be a faculty member, knew what it was like to work as a teacher using an LMS to deliver instruction, had been an online teacher, had all that experience. And making videos was my not paying hobby. But I could do it very well. And that's what I got hired to do, was to create videos for instructional purposes. And I think some of it's luck, some of it just is what's available, what you're good at, and what people need. But I was very fortunate to find something in an industry that I really cared about. I really love that I work for a community college that serves non-traditional students and has a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is the hands down the best employer I have ever worked for. They care so much about not only students, but employees. I have felt that, like actually felt the culture of where I work. And it's so just supportive of that people have lives and things happen to them. I went through, my mother passed away last August, and they were super supportive throughout that time. I got divorced and they were super supportive of that. We want to keep you around. What can we do? And it's such a wonderful thing to work for an employer where they see you as a human being and they value that more than the work that you do, if that makes any sense. But it's, anyway, I'll just get off my soapbox and let other people talk now.
So you mentioned that you're kind of open to anything, and I feel like that's true to some extent for me. And I've even considered maybe not doing an ID role, but getting on with a company that I'm interested in. And then, but I worry that if you get into a role with a company that there's not actually upward growth. So I just wonder what your thoughts or recommendations are with that. Because there's other like very similar roles to instructional design or a content developer. And so I recently applied for they were looking for a editor, which I have editing experience, and that's not ultimately what I want to do, but I love the company. So is that like a bad move? I mean, I haven't heard back from them yet anyway, but what do you think about that kind of an approach of finding a company that you really like, but maybe provide some of those cultural value things, and then hoping to work into the kind of role that you're more interested in, if that makes sense?
Sharon, you want to speak to that one, or you want me to take it, or Dejaka?
Dejaka, do you want to say anything? I hate to butt in if you have something to say.
I can speak to it a bit. So sure. I feel like at the beginning, when I first started transitioning out of teaching, I was the same way. I didn't really care. Like I just wanted anything else, right? But you can't say that out loud. So that's the problem. So in my room, I talked about, I actually took a few months off between end of contract before I started even opening LinkedIn, and really did some self work. And I think that was beneficial. It's hard to do because you have this sense of urgency. Like, what am I going to do? I don't have anything lined up. I left in May with no plan, basically, is what I did, because I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. But honestly, once I had my head wrapped around what I valued and where my strengths were and what my ambitions were, that everything just clicked, right? As long as you're intentional. So I think it's hard advice to take, but don't just start applying to anything you find. You need to intentionally research the companies that you might want to work for, and reach out to people who work in them to hear what it's actually like Sharon said, right? Mm-hmm. Look at the roles and ask people what it is like to actually do that job or work in that kind of role. I looked at stepping stone jobs. I think maybe kind of what you're thinking, like just anything within a company I was interested in, and applied for a few without success. And again, I feel like it's because I wasn't passionate about it and I wasn't super intentional. So that would be what I would recommend. That's what works well for me.
Thank
Chris, do you want to add to that? Or sorry. Is
Oh,
that
I was just saying thank you.
okay? Do you want to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, I think what Dejaka said about um, maybe lacking in the passion, I think that could come across. So it's got to be something you're still excited in, but that's basically my model. I mean, I joined Meraki. It was a lateral move for me, but I really wanted to get into this company. And after I hit 1 year, I could start applying for other roles, and I've been actively pursuing other opportunities. So you can ask about that in your interview. You can ask about promotions and growth opportunities within the team. And most managers are open to talk about that. And it also opens up this conversation about how they promote and grow people in general. And I definitely want to work for companies and teams that promote from within and are willing to grow people over time. So I think it's a great thing to talk about in your interviews when you're trying to get a sense of what teams are like.
We have just a couple minutes left. If there are any final questions from people. Jared says, Katie, I'm on a team with 3 IDs and I'm the only one that came into the company as an ID. The others started in other roles and moved over. I will say in my current position, I work in the e-learning division. We've had a lot of people who have been in other positions within the e-learning division, not instructional designers, who have been like, we have something called a student success coach. I was a media developer. And I think those are the 2 that come to my mind really quickly, but those people have, switched into this role. It's just learning a different set of skills.
Awesome. Thank you for getting a response from all 3 of you. That was great.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
If you could share some of the differences, the way that you would speak when applying to positions at like community college, like you have, Sharon, versus corporate, if there's a way that you speak about your experience and your background on your resume and cover letters.
I'll go. So what I did, my approach was talking about it through kind of the focal point being learner-centered teaching. So I'm in higher education. Learner-centered teaching was a great starting point for basically answering any question that they asked me, because everything in a community college is about supporting students. So I just, my favorite book about that topic is Mary Ellen Weimer's 5 Key Changes to Practice, Learner-Centered Teaching, 5 Key Changes to Practice, or something like that. And I just quoted things from her book that I thought were really important to keep in mind when creating assessments and think about learning outcomes. And I just, built it out from there.
Yeah, I would just say, especially when you're thinking about positioning and how to talk to hiring managers and interviewers, really, it's kind of an open book test, and the book is the job description. So they're giving you in the job description everything they're looking for. So don't just look at what they're asking for, but look at how they ask for it. Look at the language they use, the skill sets, how they talk about metrics or goals. And then you can also ask that in your early interviews. Like you can ask, how do you do planning, or what's the measure of success for this role? Find that out and then incorporate it in later interviews. So I would look there for the answers as well.
Since you mentioned that, when you say look at what they're saying a lot of times on the posting, would you ever find, it's gone by the time that there's the interview. So do you normally take a screenshot of it? If you're really applying for so many places, can that,
Yep.
I don't know what your experience or thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Once you hear from a recruiter, they're going to put you in the pipeline. I think downloading or creating a screenshot of the job description is a great practice, just to make sure you have it. Because I've seen that happen a few times as well. You should always be able to ask as well, though. You should be able to ask a recruiter to provide you a job description and a PDF, and that should be no problem.
Yeah. All right, my friends, I think we are at the end of our time today. I'm so very glad that Chris and Dejaka were able to come and share their time with us tonight, and experience and enthusiasm and encouragement, because I know that we all need that when we're making hard transitions in life like this. I hope that you will join me in August 1st, 7 to 8 p.m. I put the registration link in the chat, so if you scroll up, you can get on that, and I'll hopefully see you in a couple months. Have a great night, everybody, and I hope to see you in August. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.